All right. So, hello everyone. Salam, namaste, adab, and welcome. It's our great pleasure to host a very uh, famous scholar. I do not know whether we should say from India or from US, but Professor Rajmohan Gandhi needs very little introduction. Nonetheless, we have to give a formal introduction about him. I'm not going to say much on this part, rather invite my very dear friend Tariq Farooqi Saab, uh, who is going to give the opening remarks. Tariq Farooqi is a very well-read and very knowledgeable person on Indian history and politics and on freedom movement. So I thought it more appropriate to let him introduce a person uh, who has a lot of, uh, I mean, he's a very unique by bloodline. So probably Tariq Farooqi Saab will elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Razi. Good morning to listeners in the United States, and good evening to those who may have tuned in from India. As you know, this series of Zoom conversations with renowned writers, authors, historians, reporters, and literary figures was conceived and developed by my good friend Dr. Razi Raziuddin under the banner of Indian Diaspora. Technical assistance is provided by Mirza Faisal Beg and Dr. Rafat Hussain. Each week, we have the pleasure to participate in a talk or a discussion with a significant personality from different walks of life. These lectures and talks have been intellectually stimulating and mentally enriching. Thanks to Indian Diaspora and Dr. Raziuddin, and I should also include his wife, Dr. Arti Raziuddin, who's his better half. This week we have another high achiever, Dr. Rajmohan Gandhi, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce him today. As many of you know, Dr. Rajmohan Gandhi is the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, father of the nation. His maternal grandfather was Mr. Raja Gopalachari, the second Governor General of India. In addition to this unique pedigree, Professor Rajmohan Gandhi is a historian, journalist, teacher, and biographer interested in human rights, conflict resolution, and reconciliation. He currently serves as a research professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Mr. Gandhi is a prolific writer and has authored more than a dozen books. In 2002, he received the Sahitya Academy Award for his book Rajaji, A Life, which is a biography of Mr. Raja Gopalachari. In 2007, Rajmohan Gandhi received the Indian History Congress's biennial award for a biography of his grandfather entitled Gandhi, the Man, His People, and the Empire. Other books among many by him include A Tale of Two Revolts, India 1857 and the American Civil War, Ghaffar Khan, Nonviolent Badshah of the Pashtun, Revenge and Reconciliation, Understanding South Asian History, and Understanding the Muslim Mind. Dr. Rajmohan Gandhi has previously served as a member of the Raj Sabha, the upper house of India's parliament, as an editor of Indian Express from Chennai, and as chief editor Himmat from Mumbai. Through writing, speaking, public interventions, and dialogues, he has been engaged in sincere efforts for reconciliation and promotion of democratic rights. India, Pakistan, and Hindu-Muslim reconciliation have remained his goals. Since 9/11, he has also tried to address the growing divide between the West and the world of Islam. Dr. Gandhi will be speaking to us on the new reality in the world today, that is imperialism within nations. This talk occurs when our motherland, India, is going through a seismic change, where Mahatma Gandhi is being replaced with Nathuram Godse, where nonviolence is seen as a weakness, and where secularism has become a spent slogan. I hope that, among other things, Dr. Gandhi will also address this alarming phenomenon in our beloved India and tell us if this situation can be reversed and how. Ladies and gentlemen, with pleasure and pride, we present Dr. Rajmohan Gandhi. Sir.
Thank you, Faruqi Saab, and thank you, Raziddin Saab. And my greetings to everyone who has joined. I'm very happy to be with all of you. Now, ethno-nationalism is a phrase that we come across a lot these days. I think it's a useful phrase. It is something that is happening. Ethno-nationalism is happening in many parts of the world. Now, nationalism also has its tensions and its problems. It often unites a nation, but it also, of course, creates tensions between nations. But ethno-nationalism is a very interesting addition to it. Ethno-nationalism says that a nation does not belong to everybody in a nation, but it belongs to one particular dominant group in the nation. So the whites must take America back, Hindus must take India back. These are examples of ethno-nationalism. I think it is not unreasonable to regard this ethno-nationalism, particularly when it becomes extreme and quite determined. It is some kind of imperialism inside a nation, as I think is obvious to many of us, but it will also, I think, be clear as I continue with my remarks. Now, although ethno-nationalism is there in many parts of the world in different degrees, it's there in many countries of Europe, it's there in Brazil, it is also here in the United States, where I'm speaking from, and it's very strong, of course, in India too. There is Turkey, and there are other countries. Now, so what does ethno-nationalism or this new phenomenon do in the world? There's not only a hierarchy within a population, but also control and domination and oppression. Now, the latest phenomenon in India in this regard is the laws in several states against what is described as love jihad. And many people have written about it. P. Chidambaram has written a very fine article in the Indian Express on this. And there are some other very interesting articles in The Wire just now, I was reading today, on this subject. And as Chidambaram has pointed out, this love jihad law, so-called love jihad law, it equates marriage with misrepresentation, with force, with undue influence, coercion, fraudulent means. And as Tanika Sarkar has written today in The Wire, that these new laws by many state governments in India bring the state in two of the most personal relationships, or the two most perhaps personal relationships that human beings may have. A relation with one's partner, one's life partner, marriage partner, and the relationship with one's Almighty, with one's faith. So when it comes to faith and marriage, this new law brings government in this most intimate, profound relationship that human beings can have. So that is the most stark example of what is happening. Now, many years ago, there was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it lists many human rights that should be protected. It does not refer to the right to love, the right to marry, because like the right to eat, the right to sleep, love, marriage, the relationship with the Almighty, these are so fundamental, so natural, so eternal, so universal, that the UN Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, does not even feel the need to include these, but these are the rights of human beings that these new laws in the state governments, some state governments of India that have now been announced. Now, what this does is, this ethno-nationalism, or this new tendency for one group to dominate a nation. Nation does not belong to everybody, it belongs to this particular group. So the consequences in India, these are well known. These will not surprise anyone who lives in India, but I will mention them. There is the Supreme Court that puts off critical hearings that involve on issues that involve the lives and rights of millions. Tax officers who make well-timed raids on opposition politicians and their relatives. A parliament unable or unwilling to debate pressing issues. Policemen pursuing not the killers of a murdered person often, but pursuing the relatives of the murdered person. The Prime Minister monopolizing state-owned media and government-paid billboards across the country, but refusing to face a single probing reporter. Private but pervasive TV channels filling the country's air with toxic ill will towards particular communities. Universities pressurized to compromise on scholarly independence. Students being coerced, often with police batons, to fall in line. Intimidating journalists and human rights defenders. Raiding homes and offices of journalists and newspaper owners, silencing citizens and impeding their access to the internet. This last thing is particular, with particular force happening in Kashmir, as we know. This is what autocratic regimes do. So is it really at all accurate now to call India the world's largest democracy? Now, just one thought also on universities. We all know that so many vice chancellors in the last several years who have been named to leading universities across India. Many of them are long-time RSS pracharaks, RSS workers. They are now, many of them are in charge of universities all across India. And we know about Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, recently Vivekananda's statue has been installed there. Now, some time back, there was this plan to install a tank at JNU. The idea was that the tank would somehow convey the nationalistic spirit to the students. It was felt that the students were not showing enough of this spirit. I don't think that tank idea was executed, or I'm not sure at the moment, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, there is no tank yet on the JNU campus. But there is now this statue of Swami Vivekananda. Now, this is a huge improvement on the tank. And of course, Swami Vivekananda is a phenomenal personality. And for many, he signifies vigor, self-respect, confidence, a sense of mission. And he certainly did some extraordinary things. Now, to many, Swami Vivekananda also conveys a sense that we Indians know all that there is to know. Indian knowledge is so profound, so great, so vast in all areas, that we know all that there is to know. Whereas the spirit at JNU and on many other university campuses has been for a long time, that there is so much that we need to know. We don't know enough, we need to know more. So to me, the installation of this statue of this remarkable man also attacks this notion that there is so much that human beings, and students in particular, need to know. Now, the US also has seen so many thrusts of ethno-nationalism, but we do know that institutions are fairly strong in the US. It's not so easy to do to universities in the US what is being attempted to universities in India. It's similarly not so easy to deal with the media in the US as it is in a country like India. Now, today, December 6th, is a very important and to many sad and to many quite a bitter anniversary, because this is when the Babri Masjid was demolished 28 years ago. Everybody knows that on August 5 this year, Prime Minister Modi laid on the ground in Ayodhya this 88-pound slab of silver to commence the construction of a great Ram Mandir in the town of Ayodhya. And he said, Prime Minister Modi said, that the date, August 5, when he was starting the construction of this temple, was as important as India's independence on August 15. So August 5 would become as big a date as August 15, because the temple was now being started. Now, in November 2019, about 13 months ago, as we all know, India's Supreme Court declared that the demolition of the masjid in 92 had been unlawful. The court also declared that what happened in 49, December 49, the surreptitious, secret, in the dark hours, insertion of some idols, Rama and Sita idols, into that mosque, Supreme Court declared that that surreptitious insertion was illegal. Despite these findings, the court, as we know, awarded the site to the Hindus who were claiming it for a Ram Mandir. So now this temple is being built, and apparently August 5 was an auspicious date starting it. A magnificent Ram temple will come out, will emerge, it will rise, but it will rise on two great untruths. The notion that those idols in 49 had manifested themselves. This was the lie that was spread at the time in December 49. And the other great untruth, that the masjid somehow demolished itself and that no one is guilty of demolishing it. So on these two great untruths, fantasies, this great symbol of the new Hindu Republic of India is to rise. There is Kashmir. Now, we all know how in August of last year, August 5, the Modi government removed by overnight executive action Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, which had guaranteed autonomy to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And Kashmir is India's sole Muslim majority state. And this was done without consulting a single Kashmiri. So when you do that, if you do something to millions and millions of people without consulting any one of them, is it not the imperialist spirit within a country? Now, on October 27 of this year, just over a month ago, India's Home Ministry announced the removal of laws which go back more than a century. Laws that prevented non-Kashmiris from buying land in Kashmir. So these laws have been removed, opening the door for demographic change in the Kashmir Valley. Now, to go back again to August of last year, when on August 5, Kashmir was taken over. And on August 9, a US congressman, a man called Tom Suozzi, who's a Democrat, who represents a Long Island constituency on the edge of New York City, he wrote a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo expressing anxiety that India's scrapping of Article 70 risks provoking mass social unrest in Kashmir. He wrote this letter. Now, some Indian Americans in his constituency who had supported this man, who had financed perhaps his election, contributed to his election, they were very unhappy that Tom Suozzi had sent this letter to Secretary of State Pompeo. So they, on a Sunday, they They went to his house, demanded to meet him, they met him. So after the meeting that Suozzi had with these Indian Americans who were unhappy with his letter, so he wrote an apology. He wrote, so this is what came in the media. Based upon my meeting, Tom Suozzi wrote, it is clear that it was a mistake not to consult with some of my Indian American friends before I sent my letter to Pompeo. This was his apology. So he says, not consulting his Indian American constituents before he wrote the letter to Pompeo was a mistake. So not to consult your constituents before writing a letter is a mistake. But not to consult a single Kashmiri before changing Kashmir's status, what would you call that? And of course, we know what is happening in Kashmir: arrests, raids on the homes and offices of journalists, shutting off access to the internet. And there are elections, local elections taking place, and people are not being allowed to go and canvass or campaign. We all know that. We should also recognize what is happening, the change in the physical appearance of different parts of India. Yes, we had this fantastic statue of Sardar Patel in Gujarat, world's tallest statue. Patel is a man I've written a biography on, by the way. I know what a remarkable man he is. Nonetheless, this is a very interesting venture to build the world's tallest statue in India. But now there is this plan to give a new shape, new appearance, new physical appearance to New Delhi, to the central vista, new building of parliament, other plans envisage. So give a new physical shape to India, I suppose, so that that shape may be appropriate for the new Hindu Republic. And there's the new history that is now being taught to millions and millions of children, already being taught to scores of millions of children. And what is this history? And that before the 11th century, when Mahmud of Ghazni raided India, later in 12th century, when Ghori came and then established some kind of kingdom in Delhi, that according to this history, what happened in the 11th and 12th century is what started slavery in India. That until then, that there was that's the hypothesis, that's the theory. There was a wonderful Indian kingdom. But as far as I know, and as far as other historians know, there wasn't a Hindu kingdom or any kind of Indian kingdom covering or encompassing much of India, let alone most of India, let alone all of India. Yes, there was a very remarkable prince. There was Prithviraj Chauhan in Ajmer and perhaps also in the Delhi area. A very remarkable man. But there's no suggestion that he or anybody else was the king or the ruler of much, most, or all of India. And that great kingdom was somehow removed and slavery was introduced to India in the 11th and 12th century. And that until then, India was some kind. Now, yes, it is true that there was this remarkable ruler centuries before this happened. Harsh, who was a wonderful, remarkable ruler for much of India. He did great things. And much before him, there were the Guptas, and much centuries before that, there were the Mauryas. But to suggest that there was a great Hindu kingdom, which Ghaznavi and Ghori removed, and is of course false. So, but this history, which rests on a foundation of untruths, partial truths. When we were children, when I was a child, people of my age group, and many thereafter also for some time, certainly those before me, we were all taught British history. We learned a lot about British history. So now in this new Indian Republic, Hindu Republic, a gorgeous history of the imagination is being taught, which many will believe. And this, but of course, to those who know, this is not correct, not accurate in any way. And it'll also, when you impose this kind of false history, you then discredit wonderful history, true history, astonishing history. There was amazing Indian achievements in mathematics, in astronomy, medicine. Those were genuine things, historically established things. But this idea that there was some wonderful golden kingdom in the 11th and 12th century, which these raiders, invaders, conquerors removed and started some kind of slavery in India. This, of course, is not true. Now, the US. I think those in the US are aware of this. Last few days, Trump has expressed his great unhappiness about this man, Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State official in the state of Georgia, Republican, in charge of this election. And he said that this is what happened, that Trump did not win, that Biden won, and various counts and recounts. So Trump has called this man, Raffensperger, enemy of the people, enemy of the people. So anti-national, traitor, enemy of the people, these are phrases that autocratic, authoritarian, totalitarian rulers frequently use. And we know in India that to be called enemy of the people and anti-national traitor is very common these days. Now, those of us of Indian origin who spend some time in India or in the United States or live in the United States or say in a country like Canada, UK, Germany, France, other parts of the world, Australia, New Zealand. In many of, not necessarily in all these places, but in many of these places, scholars, activists, thinking individuals from a country like India often find here freedoms that we may not find in today's India. Many Pakistanis find in the United States freedoms they don't find in today's Pakistan. And this is true also of some other parts of the world. People from those countries find unusual opportunities and freedoms to speak, to write, to express their views. And it is a fact that for many Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, and people maybe of other faiths, more freedoms in a country like the United States than in the countries where the majority are, say, Hindus or Muslims or Sikhs. So the great question is this, and I'm speaking of those of us who have the chance to spend some time in the United States, and where there are people of all kinds. We today who are meeting, maybe most of us people of Indian origin, but the United States has an incredible, we all know this, who is not here. But do we take the chance for dialogue, for getting to know, to get closer? And so this to me is one of the questions on my mind, and I'm sure all of you are also thinking of it. Solidarity with different groups, with South Asians, with other fellow Indians, with Pakistanis, with Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, Nepalis, but also people from other parts of the world. And especially, and this is the crucial thing, what is the nature of our relationship with African Americans, with the Blacks of the United States? And now people who come from India take great pride in the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of how he was inspired by Gandhi, how many other African American leaders have spoken about what the Indian freedom movement, how it helped in their fight for human rights here. But by and large, most of us of Indian origin who are spending time in the United States, what is the extent, the depth of our friendship, our relationship, our knowledge of the African Americans? There are, of course, other great American groups too. There are the white Americans, the Latinos, the Native Americans, so many others. But especially given the incredible bond between the movement for rights among the African Americans and the movement for India against British imperialism, there was tremendous bonds. But given those bonds, the level of engagement that people of Indian origin have with African Americans is absolutely pathetic and deplorable. And I say this because I know I'm speaking to people who have an opportunity themselves with the children and grandchildren to do what needs to be done. Now here I may mention that there was this very remarkable African American who in 1946-47 was in India, a man called Stuart Nelson, who was from Harvard University of Washington, DC, African American University. And Gandhi was at that time in Eastern India, what then was still in India, in Calcutta for a while, and in what became Bangladesh, in this area called Noakhali. And this man, Stuart Nelson, met Gandhi, and Stuart Nelson was also trying to bring some kind of reconciliation. So was Gandhi. And Nelson said to Gandhi, Nelson, of course, was a much younger man then, and Gandhi was much older. He was in his late 70s. So Nelson said to Gandhi, you've been talking about nonviolence for 30 years. Why is there so much violence? Why is there killing between Hindus and Muslims in India? So Gandhi said, this is a difficult question, an important question, a tough question. And then he gave his answer to it. He said that, and these are not his precise words, but I'm paraphrasing what Gandhi said. Not only to Nelson, but he also spoke to others on this issue. Why so much violence? So Gandhi's reasoning was something like this. He said that I was urging India, fear not. I was urging India, hate not. But fear not was more popular than hate not. So to begin with, we were very keen to hate the British, but hatred of the British, the white man, soon became transferred and became hate for the other Indians. So Hindus started to dislike or to hate Muslims. Muslims started to hate or dislike Hindus. This was his explanation. Now, recently, looking at different countries in Europe, Europe had and perhaps still has a lot of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish feelings. But we also know that in some parts of Europe, France and other parts of Europe, the anti-Jewish feeling has been turned and has become an anti-Muslim feeling. So these dislikes, this ill will, this malice, this prejudice that we have about Group A can always get transferred to Group B, Group C, and so forth. But I want to return to the point I made, the need of that Indian Americans and African Americans may build solidarity. And those of us, or those of you who may have followed a person like John Lewis, who recently died, this extraordinary man. Not only Martin Luther King, there was Malcolm X and his relationship also with the world of Islam. So there is this amazing man. Those of you who saw the last memorial service for John Lewis would have heard this extraordinary man, Reverend James Lawson, who's now 92, amazing scholar of Gandhi, of the Indian independence movement. So he is another man. So at the moment, I'm not able to see you, but I imagine you are able to see me, so I'm continuing. So I hope somebody can assure me that I am.
Yes,
Yes, you are.
I can't see anybody, but that's fine. As long as you can,
Don't worry.
as long as you can see and hear me, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So the question now is, how do we cope with this situation? And especially as individuals, what does each one of us do? And I wish I knew. There is no roadmap that I'm aware of where how the world can conquer, overcome this ethno-nationalism around the world. And yes, I do sometimes think also of what my grandfather Gandhi did in situations when he didn't find clarity. Of course, one of his ways was to try and approach and seek the Almighty's aid. And then he had this wonderful thought, Ishwar Allah Tere Naam, that God is one and all of us may use different words to reach him, to cry out to him, Ishwar Allah Tere Naam. But then there is also his thought that a good person is the one who feels the stranger's pain, the other person's pain. Usre ki peeda jo samajhta hai, wo acha insaan hai. And then, as some of you may or may not know, he had this line from a song that Newman wrote, a Christian song, Lead Kindly Light. This line, I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me. I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me. So one step, what is the next step we can make? I think that is the way I try to. We all know during COVID, we live one day at a time. But to get out of this tunnel into which the world finds itself, we may also need to find the right next step. Now, since for this occasion, some wonderful Muslim friends based in the Washington, D.C. area have invited me. I recall a remark made to me by my other grandfather, who has also been mentioned in the introduction, Chakravarti Rajgopalachari, who lived until he was 94. And he rendered the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in wonderful language. And his renderings of the Ramayana and Mahabharata still remain very, very popular. He also wrote commentaries on the Gita, on the Upanishads. But here's the thing that he told me, which I think is worth sharing. Once he told me, Muslims never seem to lose faith in God. Sometimes when people he knew who were anxious about the health of a loved one, sometimes he would say, ask a Muslim friend to pray. Now, as I have looked last several decades at the history happening in our world, I too have noticed the strength of Muslim faith. For instance, when communism swept across the regions that became the Soviet Union, when communism swept across China, Muslims in China, Muslims in what became Soviet Union, they retained their belief in the Almighty. So a question, but I noticed this, I marveled at this, but a question remains in my mind. How can this remarkable faith in God that Muslims retain despite everything that happens, how can this remarkable faith in God be harnessed for greater justice, for harmony, for individual liberty? This is a question that I thought I would just place. But I will return now to the most crucial question about India. How do we move? Now, there is this farmers' movement taking place. We don't know what will happen. It's very difficult to predict what is happening. I've written books on history. I certainly can't predict what will happen in the future. But a couple of thoughts obvious ones, but I will share them for whatever they are worth. One is that we must build solidarity, not only between Indians and African Americans in the US, but between Indians of different kinds in India. Solidarity across every divide. And how does one create solidarity? One creates it by acknowledging that we don't really know enough about the other group. We're not listening to them. We don't study their stories. We don't study their histories. We don't befriend them. So building bridges across divides. and finding some kind of common ground. But then there is this need to speak the truth. Now, sometimes speaking the truth is risky. But if we wait until it becomes more convenient to speak the truth, actually it'll become harder to speak the truth. As long as there is some space, some opening, some opportunity to express dissent, we must absolutely express it. And a young friend said to me this very nice line, which is an obvious one, which all of you perhaps are aware of, that about dissent. That dissent is like lighting the first candle. If you light a candle, then it becomes easier to light other candles and light other lamps. So if you express dissent, other people will also then express dissent. So as long as there is even tiny scope for expressing our dissent, let us absolutely clearly do so, and let us build solidarity. People say that there's so many opponents of present government, whether in India or elsewhere, that we must build coalitions, we must build alliances. All that is true. But to me, more important than alliances is the fire in the mind and the fire in the heart. And when people have it and they pass it on, and that will be the beginning of the end of this kind of imperialism, whether within a nation or outside one's nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really, it is so inspiring and
now I can see you. Yes, okay.
You can see me. Okay, thank you very, very much. It was really very inspiring, and we learned a lot. It's still the same fire. Gandhiji's fire is in you, and the approach is that's what we should do. Dissent and lit the candle and all those. Now, as you wished that we should have more exchanges, and my colleague Rafat will take over from here, and I had just given some suggestion because some of the faces I can see, one very prominent one coming from JNU, perhaps they can engage you as well as the audience. So it would be on Rafat's things to judge how to proceed. Rafat.
Thank you, Razi Bhai. It was a wonderful talk, and of course, very interesting. So there are two options of asking question. Either you can raise the digital hand or put your interest in the chat box, and I will call you upon, and then you can ask the question in your own way. So the first person who put the question is Kaisar Abbas Sahab. Kaisar Abbas Sahab, unmute yourself and please ask the question. And next person will be Sayyid Amir. So please go ahead. Kaisar Abbas Sahab. Let me see if he's there.
Yes, he is there.
Okay, so Abbas Sahab, please, you are already unmute or? Okay, so in the meantime, he's getting ready. Amir Bhai, please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Gandhi. I don't know how to start, but I want to compliment you first for the excellent talk and the fact that you are an iconic figure in these days, and one of the persons, not many left, who really keep the flag of humanity alive. The second question is that obviously you descend from a very illustrious family from both sides, and the fact that you do, how has it affected your life? It has influenced the trajectory of your career, your life, and how people, when they know that you descend from Mahatma Gandhi, how does it affect your interaction with other people? Thank you so much.
This is certainly a natural question, and it has been asked many times, and I appreciate it. But I would like to say that the moment now has come, the times we are in, really who our ancestors were, what our background was, is not that important at all. Every single Indian, every single human being, of course, but if we are speaking of India, every single person in India is absolutely important. And the fire in the heart, the fire in the mind that we need is something that each of us can nurture and can protect and can intensify. So I'm glad you asked the question about my relationship, but really, we don't have to look for icons or for stalwarts or for some privileged people who have a position or a platform. That is not what is going to, take for instance, the changes that have taken place in the by the way, United States in the last few weeks and months, supposing Trump had won, what a disappointment that would have been to the world as a whole. But how was the Trump's defeat managed? Not by a handful of some very clever, iconic people. It was the ordinary American, the Black Lives Matter, and those, the whites and the Latinos and the others who supported the Black Lives Matter. They created a movement. There are many factors. We can't explain the election with one or two things, but I want people to recognize that this is not the time now to look for special people, some solution, some political trick. That, people say that people don't like, the present government in India, but who is the person? What is the alternative? So until the alternative is created, there's nothing we can do. ऐसा लोग कहते हैं. But is that really the issue? I think we must recognize that ultimately the so-called ordinary person, the individual conscience is what will not some kind of clever politics. And yes, when the time comes, no doubt the politics too will change, and the people will compel those who don't want to work together to come together to fight against a common foe. But let us not be looking for some others to create something. हम क्या कर सकते हैं, हम जहाँ हैं वहाँ हम क्या कर सकते हैं, ये हम सबको अपने आप से पूछना. So anyway.
Thank you, Rajmohan Saab. Next person is Tariq Farooqi. I think Qaisar Abbas Saab dropped out. So Tariq Bhai, you are unmuted.
Thank you for a very good lecture, and it was very inspiring. But I've got two questions, short questions. India had such a great start after independence, especially in the Nehru secular leadership and so on. So different from the neighborhood. And we've seen what happened to the neighborhood based on which way they went. So what happened in India and why did we change so quickly? That's question number one. And question number two follows from your lecture. You noted that Muslims have a very strong faith worldwide. This is, and the second part you didn't say, but I have a question, but seem to lack secular leadership. Why is that so?
Well, you asked me two very easy questions. Why has India become what it has become, and why has the Muslim world become what it has become? Well, no, there are no easy answers to this question. But of course, in India, we know that for one thing, those who believed in secularism, those who believed in democracy and freedom, they did not manage to either have a passion for their views or to unite with one another. Whereas those who believed in some kind of Hindu domination, they worked very hard, and they created soon it will be 100 years since the RSS was founded. So we may disagree with their ideology, but we have to recognize that they have worked with tremendous dedication for almost 100 years, and they have student wings, women's wings, village wings, Adivasi wings, every kind of traders, farmers. So those of us who were convinced about equality and liberalism and democracy, we didn't create that kind of nationwide commitment to spread these ideas, and it's not easy to do so either. But at political level, various people, were not willing to put aside their own viewpoints, maybe even sometimes their personal egos. So yes, failure to be passionate and to organize and to spread these ideas was a weakness, and a failure to come together. And yes, many the governments that followed in India after Jawaharlal Nehru, so many of them, we can all recognize their mistakes. But let's also remember that similar things have happened in many parts of the world. So, so there are local and national explanations, but there are also maybe some simpler and more common explanations which we have to go for. And I think I always like to go back to what each individual can do. Now, both as a historian, as a student of many events that have happened in the past, and as an observer of current events in the world, I've found one very simple truth, and which is not a great discovery. We all know of it once we stop to think of it, which is that all of us have opinions, but we don't have knowledge. We have opinions about other groups, other races, other religious groups, other caste groups, but we don't really study, we don't listen, we don't gather knowledge. Our prejudices, our biases grow, and we move in similar circles in echo chambers, so we reinforce these prejudices. But let us, each one of us, anyway, I'll stop with that. But no, okay, yes, I will stop there.
There was a second question, sir.
Yeah, that's what I want to remind.
You answered the first one, and you could have gone with the first one, but the second part of the question.
I think that is a very great question, which is for all of you to think about.
I knew that.
But no, wait a second. But let me. No,
but I wanted an outside opinion too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but there is this fantastic thought in the Holy Quran, which I'm familiar with, that God does not change society unless people themselves are willing to change. Hai na kuch aisa? I'm not quoting it exactly, but I'm sure you know what I'm saying.
Very much true.
So उसके बारे में आप सबको सोचना है कि क्या कमी हम में थी या हम में है, और हम औरों के साथ क्यों नहीं एक पार्टनरशिप बना पाए. So we all have to ask ourselves that, what is it? And it's not that if the solution is, as some people will say, we didn't observe this in a literal way, so हमने ऐसा नहीं किया, we left the path that was prescribed to us, the rituals that are prescribed to us. I think that has not led to any solutions. Those who, just as the RSS organized itself, so many brotherhoods and jamaats have been organized in the Muslim world, also with very, very great success. लेकिन उनसे क्या निकला है? What have we achieved through any of that? But if in a more practical way, Muslims will ask themselves, where is it? Now, since I mentioned the African Americans, let me say this. I was going to mention it anyway. I've over the decades had the chance to meet some African Americans, including some Muslim African Americans here in the United States. And I've asked them that when great issues happen, say in the Islamic world, why don't the African American Muslims speak out? Palestine, for instance. So, sometimes what the answers I get from African American Muslims, that the Muslims from South Asia and the Muslims of the Middle East
very racist.
They don't spend time with us. They don't mix with us. This is the answer that they have given. That the South Asian Muslims and the Middle Eastern Muslims have no time for us, is what sometimes some of them have said. So where is it? How can this partnership across races, across language groups, across national groups, how can that be created consciously? This is something that all of you have to ask.
Thank you, Rajmohan sir. So Dr. Raziuddin has suggested that to engage the few persons. I'm going to name them so they get ready before I invite the person who wants to ask a question. So Professor Zoya Hassan, Dick Ruffin, Pratap Chandra Behra, Danish Iqbal, Deepankar Chatterjee, Islam Siddiqui Saab, Mohsen Ali Khan, Professor Zaid Ashraf, and Sandeep Pandey. So please be ready to get engaged. And the next person in line is Zafar Iqbal. Please go ahead, Zafar bhai. Are you on?
Yeah, yes, and it's an excellent lecture, Professor Gandhi. My question is that BJP is likely to achieve absolute majority in the Rajya Sabha also, and with that, it will be in a position to change the constitution and other laws in the country. Is there any hope for any improvement? That's my question.
At the moment, I don't have a solution. I hope it will come.
Okay.
Thank you. The next person is Manohar R, and then is Mirdu Shekhar. So please be ready. In the meantime, the people I suggested, they can raise hands so we can recognize them and get engaged in the discussion. Manohar R, sir, please.
Namaste, Professor Ji, and everyone on the call. To the professor's talk, yes, every individual person has to do her own part. Gandhiji himself, until the day he left this earth, he questioned himself, he corrected himself, he's always open to listen to it. But at the same time, I have also seen throughout the history, I run a website called Dr. Ramana Lohia, lohiatoday.com, to propose to bring in Dr. Lohia's ideology, but also, of course, as you know, Dr. Lohia is a great disciple of follower of Gandhiji, of course, so I promote all these ideas from my side. So that's my individual effort. But at the same time, if we look at the history, whether it's the Buddha or Jesus or Gandhiji, we need an iconic leader too, right? It's one thing to have individual effort, but we also need a great leader sometimes to bring that individual energy into collective energy. Even if you look at Black Lives Matter today, it started in a very small places, but somehow it gained the strength. And yet there is always this kind of a pyramid that you look up to somebody to lead us. So isn't that what is missing today, whether it's India or anywhere else, especially for the people who believe in whether it's secularism or economic inequalities and whatnot? How we should look into the future, given the history that there is always a great leader who leads us to a salvation.
So, okay, thank you for a very understandable question. So, yes, those who believe in the Almighty can pray that some great charismatic leader will emerge. But meanwhile, until she or he emerges, let us find the leader in the person next to us. It could be our wife, it could be our brother, it could be the neighbor, it could be a young person. Any good, bright, useful, practical idea from anybody, let us embrace it wholeheartedly. There is so much leadership available around us. Yes, it will be fantastic if a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King or some fantastic person suddenly emerges. But until then, let us recognize the leader in our neighborhood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So before I move to the next person, again, I request the name the Razibai suggested. So you can raise hand, a digital hand, or put your interest to ask the question or get engaged in the discussion. So next person is Mirdu Shekhar. Mirdu Shekhar, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Rajmohan ji, for your wonderful presentation. You always bring us to the reality of what's going on around us. I had one very simple question, which I don't know, which is the history of land ownership in Kashmir. You mentioned is 100 years old, at least.
Yeah.
And I think it will be useful for most of us who are, to know what's the path it has taken. The second question is, the history is always told by the victor or is always biased for that. And both in the United States and in India, in the last few decades, so much of what we knew as fact has been put on its head, including what the British informed us about. So can you address these two issues and how
so on the land laws in Kashmir, I think you will do much better than listen to me by going to Google and studying. The internet gives you lots of information. There is lots of information on the internet on the land laws in Kashmir. And you're right about history being often written, spread by the victors. But these days, there is a lot of popular history, people's history, oral history. But you're right in, so yes, the government in India and other ethno-nationalist governments elsewhere produce their own histories and indoctrinate millions with those histories, and that is a reality. But then imaginatively produced true histories, to the extent that we can find them, there's no such absolute truth about history, because after all, the evidence we can collect from history is always limited. And there's so much that has happened that perhaps we are not aware of. So we can't say this is exactly what happened. But if to the best of our ability, we find a reasonable, fair history about anything, so then it is up to some of us, those of us who are creative, who can make videos or make YouTubes or tell these stories. So to impart the truth of what happened, already, by the way, so many wonderful individuals and groups in India too are doing this in their own limited way. So, but that each of us, just as citizen journalists are being encouraged, citizen historians also should be encouraged.
Okay, thank you, Rajmohan Saab. Next person is Padmas, and I request Iram Gul to be ready. So Padmas Saab, please go ahead, unmute yourself if you are not. Let me see, Padmas. He dropped out, I think. I don't see him in the list. But next person is Iram Gul.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Padma Rangaswamy, and it's a she.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a little late joining, but thank you for the opportunity to ask my question. So, Dr. Gandhi, I'm kind of wondering whether today democracy really, people think of democracy only in terms of a democratically elected government. But once elected, the government begins to think that it owes its allegiance only to the people who brought them to power, and that they can, with impunity, ignore the rights and wishes of the minorities. And I'm thinking of both the US and India, where, I mean, the situation is so remarkably parallel, it's quite frightening. And the other, the corollary to this is that is the only way to kind of turn the tide is to wait for the next election and hope that you can vote the quote unquote majority, however slim it is, out of power. And in India, where there is not a distinctive alternative to the majority. You addressed that earlier too. You said, who else do you elect if you want to vote a current administration out of power? If you don't have that, what are we left with? And without a strong press, I feel that this election of Biden this year was only possible because of the constant hammering by the media, calling out their lies and the, disinformation, not only by the administration, but all the, big tech companies that refuse to suppress the lies or, work actively to prevent that disinformation. So what is the hope other than, each one of us acting individually? How can we assure ourselves that the path forward is, once elected, what more can we continue to do other than rely on a strong press?
But you made some wonderful points, very valid points, very important points. And you're so right that the press, the media played a very large part, but so many people played a large part. Even the niece of Trump played a part.
Yeah.
And this lady, is it Olivia Troy, who left the Republican task force, the COVID task force, it was so frank about failure to do. So many individuals also played their part.
Agree.
So many people did their duty where they were, and some of them did their duty exceptionally skillfully and with great competence and persistence and imagination. So yes, you're right. Now, and I think Biden's point after he became president-elect that he would like to govern not just for those who voted for him, but for everybody, that's a tremendously important thought. And I think we may dislike Mr. Modi, we may dislike Donald Trump, but not everybody who voted for Modi or everybody who voted for Trump is quote unquote a bad person. So it's very important for us to figure out how, this is where as individuals we can play even a limited part in our circle. We should be ready to open our minds and hearts and have time for some people. Of course, the COVID situation makes it difficult to interact with too many people. But even in our minds, we have to have some readiness to interact with, and we have confidence that we can meet these people and by listening to them, finding some common ground with them. We may not agree on politics, but to begin with, we may agree on something else. We may agree on some sporting development or some other situation. But it's absolutely essential that we don't regard those who have supported people we don't like or ideologies we don't like. Those people are also human beings like us, and we must keep our minds and our hearts open to them.
You're so right. Thank you so much for that, because I think that is the only way we will heal here in America. And that is the only way forward in India too, to just unilaterally condemn and continue to distance ourselves from the opposition will not bring us back to the days when no matter if we have a majority elected government, the rights of the minorities are always protected.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm going to put people on the spot. I'm asking Dick Ruffin. So please, do you want to get engaged or have some comments? And the next person will be Islam Siddiqui Saab.
Well, thank you for calling on me. I don't see too many others who are, you could say, white Americans on this call.
That's true.
I like to engage Rajmohan on the question. What those of us who were quite strong in our efforts to dump Trump, we also need to identify, don't we, with the struggles in India. And I think it's, on the whole, far from the minds of most of us in the dump Trump movement to do anything on behalf of India. What might you suggest to us who become aware through you and others of the crisis in India? What small steps might we take in terms of relationships we may have with those in the incoming Biden administration, in terms of our own relations with the Indian community in America, which is large, and which I'm afraid I know relatively few of you who are on this call. Perhaps that is a small step, but what steps can we, who fought hard for Mr. Biden's election, what can we do to help assist in
Thank
India?
you for thinking like that and for asking this question. I really appreciate it so much, Dick. And I think you mentioned people in the new Biden administration. That is so key. So the elected members, even those who join in official capacities in the administration, but especially those who join as in the Congress or the Senate, if they can be informed of what is happening, the human rights violations, as I mentioned, many of us from other parts of the world who come to the US, we appreciate the freedoms we have. Sometimes we have more freedom in the US than we have in our own countries. And so this, it's fantastic how Americans, despite so many happenings in the past, 9/11 happened, and yet many Americans are the first to stand up against the so-called Muslim ban. And I think it would be absolutely useful, valuable to those of us who are fighting for democracy in India, if the individual members of the Congress, US Congress, and even in states, one thing that has emerged from the recent US election is the importance of officials at the local level, at the state level, Secretary of State, the individual election, those who run the elections. The strength of the US lies at the grassroots, at ground level. So at ground level, even local newspapers in small towns or large towns in the US, if they can be given information about the reality in India, that would help a lot. But thank you for asking the question, Dick, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next is Islam Bhai, and then I will request Iram Gul to be ready. Islam Bhai, unmute yourself. You are on mute, Islam Bhai.
Thank you,
Great.
Professor Rajmohan Gandhi. This was a fascinating and inspiring talk. And I tell you, I also want to compliment Razi, your group, for bringing very high quality speakers like Ravish Kumar and Professor Guha, and now Professor Rajmohan Gandhi. So appreciate, I think you have given us a roadmap in terms of individual responsibility in response to several questions Tariq asked, other people asked. So my question is, I think I want to dissect this issue, which is so big. I don't know whether we can speak for Muslims in India or Indians in India, because this is their responsibility. But the crisis, which is the crisis of democracy, which is going on, I think it's not a Hindu or Muslim or Sikh problem. This is a problem for all of us. So how do we create a coalition in the US of like-minded people to seek a common ground? Like you said, this is the biggest challenge I see. But I very much agree with you. You have given us a roadmap. How do we implement it?
So, that's the key. So depends on where you are, sir, in which city you live. So one would be when time permits, as may happen in a month or 2 or 3, if it's possible also for people to physically meet, even at a local level, even a small group that is active for democratic rights in India would help a lot.
Yeah.
And at the virtual level, already there are different groups. But if we can be more active in those groups for providing information both of the wrong things that are happening and also of dissent that is taking place. So keeping a widening circle informed steadily of the need for a struggle for human rights and the way the struggle is conducting. So to keep encouraging and widening your active circle. That is my suggestion.
Thank you, Rajmohan Saab. So after Iram Gul, I'm gonna to put some people on the spot. Asim Siddiqui Saab, Sandeep Pandey, Mohsen Ali Khan, Dipankar Chatterjee. So please be ready. And so Iram Gul, please go ahead.
थैंक यू आपको देखकर सर मेरा दिल चाह रहा है मैं बहुत सी बातें करूं लेकिन मैंने अपने आप को सिर्फ 2 सवालों तक कंटेन कर लिया है
लेकिन मैं आपको देख नहीं पा रहा हूं आप हैं कहां
ओके स्पॉट
सर मैंने
स्पॉटलाइट
वीडियो ऑन नहीं की हुई अपनी सर मैं वीडियो ऑन कर लेती हूं मैं सर मेरा सवाल ये है कि आपने कहा कि white US belongs to whites and India belongs to Hindu. I want to ask then what about the people who lived before them in USA and before Hindus in India, Red Indians and the Ravars and Gonds and Bhils in India who were living before the arrivals of Aryans or Hindus. And my second question is, sir, India is such a resourceful region, the whole subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Why it is lagging far behind economically and politically? Thank you.
Okay. So, of course, thank you for your question. I did not say that India belongs to Hindus. I said that the ethno-nationalists say that India belongs to Hindus. Such people say that America belongs to whites. Of course, India belongs to everybody who lives in India. Everybody who lives in India.
Yes.
And similarly, the United States belongs to everybody who lives in the United States. So, why India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, that region has not developed as well is a question that needs detailed answers. But let me say one thing. As you have also noticed, sister, that in the United States in the last several months during COVID, the number of people from South Asia, including Pakistanis, Indians, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, who have helped, to articulate what to do with the COVID crisis. कितने सारे doctors आपके South Asia के जो यहाँ मदद कर रहे हैं. So with all the undeniable failures, weaknesses in South Asia, by God's grace, some wonderful South Asians are helping both in South Asia and elsewhere in the world. So we can encourage all that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Sandeep Saab, Sandeep Pandey ji, please let me see if you are on mute. Okay, I ask you to unmute. Maybe you can go now.
I'm trying.
Come closer.
जोर से बोले संदीप पांडे जी.
Okay, you are good to go. No, we don't hear you.
नहीं करो. क्या बात हो गई भाई?
आवाज नहीं आ रही है?
आ रही है.
बहुत पतली आ रही है. बहुत पतली आ रही है.
जरा करीब से बोलिए.
अच्छा. मैं अंग्रेजी में पूछूं या हिंदी उर्दू में?
जैसे चाहें.
आपकी मर्जी.
कुछ लोग ऐसे भी हैं जो हिंदी उर्दू नहीं समझ पाएंगे.
कोई बात
नहीं, फिर मैं अंग्रेजी में पूछूं. राजमोहन जी, I want to ask this question to you. I joined somewhat late, but I heard that you were saying that the people who are in power today is because of their hard work. Now, I have, are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Yes, yes.
I can hear you.
So, you know, a lot of people these days, you know, are saying similar things that, you know, RSS has been around for this long, and it is because of their hard work, you know, that they are in power. But I differ with this view slightly. You know, in my experience as a grassroots activist in India, I see that the Gandhian, socialist, communist, Ambedkarites, you know, and even ordinary social activists, you know, who may not be associated with any ideology, who may be working as part of some NGO or some people's organization, some people's movement, you know. I see them more committed to their work, to their ideology, whereas, the Hindutva organizations are not even faithful to their own ideology. You know, they used to profess Swadeshi, but you know, look at the kind of you know, foreign investment and promotion of foreign investment and the multinational corporations that this government is doing. Not just this government, even the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government was doing the same thing. It is true that it was Narasimha Rao who started the policies of privatization, liberalization, and globalization. But the way the BJP government has implemented it, you know, it cannot even be compared, you know, with what the UPA governments were doing. Um, you know, look at their commitment to saving cows. You know, Mr. Modi has himself admitted that some of his Jain friends are running abattoirs. Uh, then, you know, look at their commitment to uh, you know, religion. I mean, the Indian culture that they talk about. I mean, I don't see anything other than violence and hegemony, you know, and supremacy. I mean, is that the Indian culture which a common Indian practices? So, you know, they go against everything they themselves say, and, you know, by using trick, misleading people, you know, they are supposed, they are against caste-based reservation. They are against caste politics, you know. But without, setting up caste arithmetic, they cannot win any election in India. And it is a well-known fact that they have brought, you know, their vote base used to be only with the upper.
Thank
We
you.
lost you, Sandeep Saab. Anyway, please go ahead, Rajmohan Saab.
Sandeep ji has made some very valuable points. I don't think I said that hard work has brought them power. I did say that RSS over the last 100 years has spread through a lot of dedication and hard work. I think it is also true, undoubtedly, that because they've experienced power in recent years, that power has also corrupted them, many of them. It's also true that they have no problem or no difficulty in contradicting themselves and following policies totally opposite to what they have. So that is also true. And Sandeep ji makes some extremely valuable points. But I will say this, that in addition to identifying the hypocrisy, the inconsistency in the Hindutva groups, we must also admit the failure of those of us who don't like Hindu nationalism, who want India to belong to all. We must admit that many of us in our different groups have not worked together. We have allowed our differences to become more serious than they should be, more divisive than they need be. And so that is undoubtedly one of our weaknesses. And so, but Sandeep ji's point is correct, and I think we should, where it is possible, to identify and speak about these hypocrisies in the Hindutva group, we should also do that. But my point was confined to acknowledging anything that is positive without accepting their divisive ideology at all, totally opposing it. But in these human beings, if there are some positive qualities, which often there are, we should have no hesitation in acknowledging. But I think Sandeep ji and I are exactly on the same side.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So Asim Siddiqui Saab is adding a question to Pandeyji's question. BJP is always surprised by the success it achieves. They always get more votes than they expect. So obviously it's not only due to hard work. So do you have a comment on that? Thank you, Asim Saab.
I'm very happy for Asim ji to have the last word on this.
Asim Saab.
Asim,
उन्होंने सवाल थोड़ी पूछा, उन्होंने अपनी बात रखी है.
That's good. Okay, so Deepankar Chatterjee Saab, are you ready? Or Mohsin Ali Khan Saab, any one of you? Otherwise, I move forward to the people who showed interest. If not, go ahead. Let me see if Mohsin Saab. Okay, let me move forward. Amrana. Amrana, please unmute yourself and you are.
एक सवाल मैं रफत एक सजेशन आपको देना
Hello, this is Mohsin.
Sorry,
this is Mohsin Ali Khan.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Professor Gandhi, for your thoughtful talk. I think you have, apart from all that, you have really pricked our own thinking of everybody who's listening to you now. You speak of alliances with the blacks, but I would go back and also, in retrospect, looking even at myself personally, talk about alliances with our people in India and here, which are Dalits. So this is a real perplexing question for me. It's not only blacks, but I don't think, at least me and many others, I think have not either interacted or even thought, I don't, maybe they thought, but they're of alliances, let alone the blacks, but the Dalits of India, who are here in large numbers, by the way.
Yeah, they are.
And in this regard, I would suggest a very good, which I've gone through, is the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, which gives a good parallelism between blacks and Dalits, which we have so much in common. So that's one comment. Let me also finish my side so you can probably respond to the other things. So that the book called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, I recommend that everybody hear and otherwise read it. You spoke about US election. The message, if I'm correct, and you can endorse it, is that what one could achieve by collective action. It's not only individuals are fine, individual views and so on, but if you want to achieve the results, I think, am I correct in assuming that the elections recently in the United States were a result of collective action by many, many groups, or a large number of groups. The last comment I would have is on the recent municipal election in Hyderabad, where the BJP increased its seats from 4 to 47. and became the second largest party. And the TRS lost 43 seats and the OAC lost 1. And the disturbing comment at the end of it was that Amit Shah in the BJP victory said this victory has started the dismantling of the Nizam culture, and we will be back. So I stop after those comments. I leave it to you.
So
Thank you.
Mohsin Saab, is that your name, Mohsin Saab?
Yes.
Jia Mohsin Ali Khan.
Mohsin Ali Khan, where do you live, Mohsin Saab?
Virginia.
Virginia.
McLean, Virginia.
Okay. Now, thank you for your points. And I have read, by the way, Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, and I also join you in recommending it. It's a very important book. And you're absolutely right about the Dalits. That it is our moral duty, and it is also, there is political wisdom in befriending and cultivating and working with Dalits and African Americans and others. So I totally endorse you on that. And on your last point about Hyderabad and what has happened there, we have to observe this. And the BJP, which thus far has not had too much success in the South, except in Karnataka, but now is trying very hard to also extend its influence in the South. So all of us have to be aware of this. And so it's essential, in Telangana, in the Hyderabad area, there are so many Hindus who have not been for BJP, but their friendship, partnership, mutual understanding with the Muslims of Hyderabad is relatively limited. So that also has to grow. So what you are suggesting, namely that those of us who are in this country, we should work more with African Americans, with Dalits also who live in the United States, but in the Hyderabad area and in Telangana as a whole, there is so much scope. Again, as I mentioned earlier about this country, that so much happens at ground level. There also in India too, the ground level through the BJP has with a proper plan, and of course they also now have huge resources, but they go into now panchayat elections, local elections with tremendous resources and tremendous determination. So that only means that the ground level work in India also has to grow if we can help it grow. But you have identified some very great issues, and I respect you for that, and I wish you the very best.
I just want to say that I was there in March in Hyderabad, and all my Hindu friends and Muslim friends said there is BJP can never get hold in Hyderabad. And unfortunately, that thing has not come. I was very skeptical. And it has come true, which is very sad. Now, the last point we have just want you to touch base on is the collective or coordinated action. Because most of us here work in our small little cubicles, and we don't go beyond. And so your suggestion of collective action, I think, is very useful, and it will be very effective also. Otherwise, we'll remain disparate in our own little eggshells. Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, the word that I used more than once in my talk was solidarity.
Exactly.
So, but let us work together, Mohsin Saab.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rajmohan Saab. We apologize that we have gone over time, but there is one more question I promised someone. So if you agree, I can ask her. Amrana Saab, Saiba, sorry. Please unmute.
Yes, so thank you so much. This was a really interesting discussion. And I just wanted to understand, so this feeling of divisiveness essentially came from somewhere. It didn't just come overnight. So for example, there's a tremendous amount of funding from the Western countries that goes to fund the BJP right now. And I just wanted to understand, as minorities in the US, what is the psyche behind funding such authoritarianism in India? And for example, you talked about people not really interacting and associating with each other. And for example, what's happening, and I'm from Hyderabad, and the problem is the ghettoization of Muslims, where you can't buy property or you can't live in certain areas. So they've found a way to prevent that usual interaction that used to have. In my neighborhood in Hyderabad, in my family's neighborhood, there used to be Hindus, Christians, Muslims all live together, but now it's just much harder for that interaction to actually happen. But what is the problem here that causes people to fund, that benefit so much from being of the minority status here, to fund that over there?
Well, if you are shocked that many Indians in the United States are for Hindutva, then you are in for many shocks.
No, but what I'm saying is, it's not that I'm shocked. What I'm saying is that I don't think that there was really an honest discussion from the very beginning. I think these things were already very latent and deep before, and they've just all been stoked and they've come out now.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And you know, so this, what, for want of a better phrase, this ethno-nationalism is strong in many countries. So, so this has happened that people of Indian origin have suddenly, many Hindus have taken great pride in their Hindu-ness, and they want a Hindu nation rather than an Indian nation. This is a reality. Fortunately, there are a great many others who don't. And so we have to widen this latter circle, and we have to recognize what has happened. But what you say about ghettoization in Hyderabad is so true. It's also taken place in so many places. And of course, I know that the difficulty for Muslims to rent places is an old story across India. It's become much worse in recent years, but it's been there. And so these are very painful, tough realities, but God willing, we will together do something about them. So Armana ji, aap kahan ki hain?
Oh, I live in Maryland.
Yeah, great. See, you're in Maryland, Virginia, DC. You are a very strong group where you are. So I have high expectations from all of you.
Thank you, Rajmohan Saab. Manohar Saab, I'm sorry, because of the interest of time, I probably cannot take a second question from you. And so we are going to wrap up. I have just a simple comment, not a question. It's not a political comment. You talked about fear not, hate not theory. So I was thinking that it's a philosophical question. So if someone hates person A, so he will hate person B also. I find it difficult to accept that fact. You said because they were hating the British, so they started hating Muslims or any other group. So maybe you are right, but I have not seen in my own life that if I hate one person, I will hate a second person too. So that is only my comment. You don't have to talk about that. But if you wish, and then Razi Bhai will wrap up the final.
So thank you for asking a very important psychological question. But remember that I also mentioned in my remark about certain parts of Europe. Take this political party in France that is very successful now, this lady. So earlier they had a very strong anti-Jewish foundation. So now they've transferred it and it has become an anti-Muslim thing. So it is not unknown in different parts of the world that hatreds can shift from A to B to C. But I think the really important point is, if we recognize the hate inside us, can we expel it and have a greater passion for justice, for brotherhood, for solidarity? If we can replace hatred with solidarity, that is the challenge before us. But thank you for asking a very fundamental question.
Thank you, Rajmohan Saab. Razi Bhai will wrap up and give some information for the next meeting. And thank you so much for going over time. I know it is 15 minutes over, and just bear with us for a few more minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafat. In these meetings, I see a progressive development of a philosopher locally here, Dr. Syed Rafat Hussain. He is putting a very, all his questions are all very philosophical, touching the human chord. It is so difficult not to hate people whom you don't like it, but it is a really challenging one. Like, how to become constrained and put your energies in a positive manner. I will send you all the chat thing, and I'll introduce you also some names, some very activist name here locally. One particular is Ambassador Dr. Islam Siddiqui sir, who is based in Washington here, and his American Muslim institution is doing a lot of work. Another one is Mohsin Ali Khan Sahab, the Hyderabadi group, who is also very much doing or involved actively in engaging non-Muslims and other Indians to build up a coalition. And I'll send you all the details. And these kind of interactions really are the real sessions where we can build up more coalitions and probably broaden the whole scope. And thank you very much. Really, it has been very long. So I defer my putting a question, usually I do. And rather than that, I'll just tell you all that a YouTube will be uploaded just in 2 days, and you will see it. It goes publicly. And so my next announcement is for the coming every Saturday we do one session, and always it covers different things. Like today is more political and situation, more government or public sector. Another one goes for culture, and always there is a aim that it should be building the bridge type thing. So next is a very famous old traditional festival that Mughal emperors started in Delhi, and it is called Phool Walon Ki Sair. And Dr. Rana Safvi, who is a historian trained at Aligarh Muslim University and a very famous journalist historian, she's going to present this whole thing, Phool Walon Ki Sair, on coming Saturday at this same time, 11. And this Phool Walon Ki Sair was started, I think, during the last phase of Shah Jahan or sometimes, and it starts traditionally from a temple and ends at a dargah. And this is how still it is going on since almost 300 years. So it is Rana Safvi who will give you all a very wonderful glimpse of what it is coming Saturday. So thank you all. It has been almost 1 hour, 50 minutes. And thank you very much. So you all can please go to your destinations. And Rajmohan sir,
Thank you so much, Rajmohan sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Those who want to stay, they are welcome to stay. I'm going to unmute everyone.